No. We just continue about our discussion. Okay. So the best thing about the data analysis is you need to understand about this thing lah. The first one, we need to know about the numeric facts. So the numeric facts will consider under the scale of measurement. So the scale of measurement are being discussed after this. I'm going to explain to you what is the different type of the scale of measurement so that you can have some idea. And then the next one will be collection of data. If I got some times or I got extra time, I'm going to share with you how you can collect the data using the online questionnaire, online method, so that you can make yourself easier. You got one year, right, staying in this college to collect data, making proposals, and then doing your research lah. The next one, we are going to analyze your data, present and interpretations of data. So I hope by the end of this course or by the end of this semester, you can get some skills. That these skills is very important and crucial for you to be used in your clinical setting or in your healthcare facilities. Otherwise, this is what happened in our country because we tend to neglect that the research is important. Therefore, we are more happy to treat people rather than to prevent them from getting sick. Okay, the next one is the role of statistics. So the role of statistics as follows. So you can see here, the first one, you got the data. So how you can got the data? Two types of data that you can got. The first one is by primary. Primary means that you collect your data by your own. You collect your data by your own, you develop your own questionnaire, you ask the respondent to give the data for you. And then the second one is to get the data from elsewhere. So this one we call it as a secondary data. So secondary data can be gathered through the medical records, but this one needs a permission from the ethical review clearance. And then you can also get the secondary data from the other relevant agencies. For example, in terms of cancer, you got some cancer database, something like that, right? So all of that are considered the secondary data. So secondary data also can be utilized in your research, so up to you. But in my humble opinion, I may suggest you using the primary data lah. This one is much more easier. Why? Because it is collected by you and therefore the data is belong to you. So if the data belong to you, you can manipulate your data, you can discard your data, you can do anything that you like using the data. Unfortunately, for secondary data, we have some issues. For example, incomplete data. So the incomplete data, you need to retrace back. You cannot manipulate the original data. You need to have a permission from the respondent. And then the next one, we got the statistical tools. So in these statistical tools, the most important thing is these two items, the descriptive and also the inferential statistics. So I'm going to discuss with you slowly, and hopefully you will understand what is we are talking about, the descriptive statistic and also the inferential statistic. Both of these statistics are very important, especially if you want to make argument, if you want to make your data clearer, what is your data is talking to you. So you must able to visualize that your data is actually trying to communicate with you. But you first, as the researcher, need to understand what is the hell is going on with my data. Okay, so that is the hint. And the last one, we got the informed decision. So the informed decisions are very useful, especially for the policy maker. You know, policy maker lah, the people who make the policy, politicians. So all of these are very important data so that they can make informed decision. Okay, hopefully lah, hopefully they make informed decision. Okay, type of statistic can be categorized as follows. We got the first one, we got a descriptive and inferential. So the first one, descriptive. Descriptive are talking about the descriptions of data. So under the descriptive statistic, we are consider following data analysis. The first one I'm going to share with you is the MCT, measurement of central tendency. Measurement of central tendency. Or in Malay, we call it as a pengukuran kecenderungan memusat. Okay, what does that mean? MCT are talking about three important items as follows. The first one is mean, the next one is mode, and then the next one is median. We are going to describe our data based on their centers. You know, centers, dia titik tengah. For example, you got a tabulations of data. You got here as a mean, and then we want to know where is the median and also where is the mode. Mode is frequency of the data. Median is the center line of the data, the titik tengah of the data. So never mind, I'm going to explain to you one by one after this. And then after MCT, we are going to learn about MD. MD is not a medical doctor, but this one is a measurement of dispersion. Dispersion in Malay, we call it as the pengukuran serakan. Serakan, that's mean from the center into the data dispersion, we are talking about standard deviation or variance. We are talking about range. we are talking about interquartile range, we are talking about minimum and maximum, and we are talking about what else? That one is the dispersion. So the dispersion have so many numerical and statistical approach. That one I will explain to you also. Under the descriptive statistic also, we are going to discuss about normality. You know about normality? Normality is the assessment where we want to look into our numeric data is whether it's being tabulated normally or not normally. What is normal and not normal, I will explain to you after this, okay? Basically, frankly speaking, the normal data can have something like this lah. We got a bell shape. Did you remember the bell shape during your school before? It's 20 years ago, right? You learn about this statistic and then you got this histogram, and then from histogram you got this bell shape. So the bell shape is actually just to share with you and to show you the idea of tabulation. So the tabulation is normal if the data is being tabulated under the perfect curve, something like this lah. This is not perfect curve lah, but something like this. So that one we call it as a normal data, normal tabulations of data. So the normal tabulation also are considered under the descriptive statistic. So under the descriptive just now, I made a repetition. The first one we are talking about MCT, measurement of central tendency, which is consists of mean, mode, and median. And then the next one we are considered to correct, MD is about the measurement of dispersion, such as variance, standard deviation, range, minimum, maximums, and interquartile range. So all of these are covered under the descriptive statistic. And then the next one for the descriptive statistic, we cover also the normal tabulation. And last but not least, under the descriptive statistic, we are going to cover the EDA. EDA, we are talking about exploratory data analysis. So exploratory data analysis are focusing on the data that is not numeric data or other data. For example, I'm asking about the gender in this class, the gender of male and female in this class. So we got male, we got female. Male and female have no value, right? Because male and female do not consist any numeric value. So this one will consider a frequency and percentage distributions or presentations of data. And therefore, it is covered under the EDA, exploratory data analysis. So EDA is the most prominent ideas. If you got the data, you need to do the EDA first. And then you need to screen what happened to our data. Is there any missing values? And if the missing values exist, you need to do some correction, manipulation, you delete, you transform your data, and so on and so forth. Okay, so far so good? Understand or not understand? That one is only talking about the purpose descriptive. Now we are going to the next one, which is we are talking about the next one is inferential. Inferential, in the other way, or in other words, we are talking about hypothesis testing. It's a hypothesis testing, okay? It's not hippopotamus. Hippopotamus is a badak air. This one is a inferential statistic. We are talking about hypothesis testing. So we have 5 steps of hypothesis testing. So the 5 steps of hypothesis testing will be discussed after this. Don't worry about that. And you must also understand the inferential statistics are being divided into 2 different statistics. The first one we call it as a parametric analysis, and then the next one we call it as a non-parametric. Non-parametric and parametrics are depending on the tabulations of data. If the data is normal, then we are going to use the parametric. If the data are not normal, then we are going to use the non-parametric. Or if the data is categorical or non-numeric data or ranking data, then we are going to use also the non-parametric. Okay, I make a repetition. The first one we call it as a parametric, not parameswara. Parametric and non-parametric. Okay, so parametric are specially designed and special approach for normal tabulations of data. Normal tabulations of data means that your data tabulated normally lah, bell-shaped condition, numeric. So that is the condition before you can use the parametric test. Unfortunately, for the non-normal data, for non-tabulated data, or you got the categorical data or ranking data, you know ranking? Ranking means that the data is being sorted by order list. For example, the satisfactions of your perception attending my class. We got 1, hampir 5 very good. So this one is ranking. Example lah, okay? So the ranking the categorical data and also non-tabulated data are considered to be used the inferential statistic using non-parametric test. So parametric or non-para is a test. It's a test for hypothesis. So the test of hypothesis is the inferential statistic. Faham? Okay, test of hypothesis adalah ujian inference. Ujian inference ni adalah apa? Testing of your assumption. You want to test your assumption. For example, my assumption, all of you are clever. For example lah kan, all of you are clever, then I will make a test, then I will see whether you're clever or you are actually not clever. So that is the testing of assumption, because I need to have the pre-assumption first before I can do the testing. Okay, so far so good, ladies and gentlemen. You follow me, you unfollow, or you already follow on call? You follow, eh? Okay. In any time, if you got stuck or you miss some part of my explanation, you can just raise up your hand. If you afraid that your ketiak will be sore, you can just do like this also. I will understand lah. Okay. Just kidding lah. Okay. The next one is the number of variables. So this is what I'm talking about, the assumptions. If we assume that our data is normal tabulation, then we are going to use the parametric. If we assume that the data is not tabulated normally, then we are going to use the non-parametric. Excuse me. Okay, the next one are the number of variables. Number of variables is, as you know lah kan, one variables we call it as a univariate. Multiple variable we call it multivariate. And then you got two variable we call it as the bivariate. For example, one variable in this class I'm talking about just now is your cleverness test. IQ test lah. Contoh, I test your IQ. So your IQ is actually one variable, betul tak? Okay, I'm going to use a questionnaire or a specific test protocol by Mensa. So this one is a standard questionnaire that I can share with you, and then you answer accordingly. I want to know whether your IQ is good or not good. So my hypothesis, you all are very good. Okay, or my assumption will be you got higher marks lah. You got 120 and above. Your IQ must be more than 120. So after I made some testing and then I go back and test and key in your data, and then I want to know whether you more than 120 or you less than 120. So that is one example of hypothesis testing. Okay, I got assumption, most of you will get more than 120, and then based on the data, I will see whether more than or less than. Okay, from that one, we call it as assumption testing in the inferential statistic. Okay, for the bivariate, I just want to explain to you in the case of IQ, what is my IV? Sorry, what is my variables? Is IQ lah. IQ is my variable. Example, I put another variables. For example, age. I got another example is age, whether you are more than 30 years old or less than 30 years old. I want to see whether there is a differences between more than 30 or less than 30 in terms of your IQ. So this one we call the second variable. Okay, second variables means that if I want to use this both of it, IQ and age, so this one is 1, this one is 2. 2 is bivariable. Multivariable is if you got more. If you got more lah, IQ, age, what else? Salary, salary. Most of you get same salary kan? Ke lain-lain? Lain-lain kan? Some of you got 3,000, 30,000, depends on where you work lah. Okay, based on my study in the past few days, majority of the nurses got more than 4,500 lah. It's more than our salary. Don't worry. You all are very rich. Okay. Okay. The next one is the population and sample. So population and sample is actually talking about the study group. The study group or your interested participant. So you must understand that actually you are not doing Anda bukan buat apa nama kita panggil ni sebagai massive survey. No, you are not going to do a lot of survey which is consists of every patient in your clinic. No, you are going to choose a subsample of your population. So population is the big one. For example, I got a population of student inside ILKKM. So I'm going to choose some of you to become my samples. So I need to identify first what kind of students. If I'm talking about the basic students, so I need to collect all of the samples among the basic students, because the basics is different with the post-basic, right? So that one we call it as a population. The sample is actually a subdivision or a subset from the population. So you must able to understand what is your populations of interest and then what kind of samples that you want to withdraw, because these samples are going back to be generalized or are going back to be interpreted inside your populations of interest. For example, I want to study about prostate cancer. So prostate cancer are among male kan? So your population will be male lah. You jangan ambil female sekali, pelik itu, dia orang tak ada prostate. So that is the example. Same also goes to the breast cancer ke. Tapi breast cancer might able to have this both gender because both of them got the probability to get those cancers. Okay, itu yang you kena faham about the populations, and then another one will be the samples. The sample is subdivision. So what you take is actually a samples. You're not taking the population. Okay, so far so good. Okay, the next one, this is about the parameter or the statistical jargon. So this just want to share with you the jargon lah. The jargon means that the symbols associated with the statistical evaluations that we need to conduct after this. Okay, the next one is the type of samples. I think you learn already all these things, right? Never mind. Don't take picture because I will give you the notes. No need to copy, no need to write down. Just understand first the concept. Because after this, theoretically speaking, you will be happy lah. After we break, then you know already everything. Then we can proceed to the next chapter. Okay, this is a simpler thing. Don't worry. Don't make your life miserable. I just want to make your life become cheerful. Okay. This one is a simple topic. Okay, don't worry so much. We will finish this one in less than a few minutes, and after that, you are going to hell or you are going to heaven. I don't know lah, up to you lah kan. Okay, the first one we are talking about type of samples. So the samples are actually divided into two different approaches. As I mentioned to you, we got a populations and also we need to withdraw a sample from a populations. So the question is how I want to withdraw a sample so that the samples are representative. So the keywords there is the representative. Representative means that mewakili kan. Seems like our politician or our politics peoples are actually representative of our mukim, of our district, adun, and so on and so forth. That is what we are practicing now. So same also goes to the samples. We are going to withdraw a few peoples, a subsample from our populations, but we have to approach. Whether you want to use the probability samples or you want to use the non-probability samples. What is the difference between probability and non-probability? The difference is the what? The difference is about the approach. Okay, the probability samples means that everybody get the equal chance to be selected. That means you are employing probability statistics to make sure everybody in this class get the equal chance to be selected. So that is the definition. If you are talking about probability, everybody get the equal chance to be selected. For example, I want to choose some of you to become my respondent of my research. So how I want to withdraw the samples from this class populations without bias. So that is another trick or another terminologies that you need to understand. The first one, I need to use a simple random sampling, or I can use the stratified random sample. So this is all the approach. How to do that? You need to learn from the research methodology class. Okay, I'm not going to explain that one, but if you ask and you insist to understand, I will share with you lah, don't worry. And then the next one is non-probability samples, or we call it as a bias samples. Bias samples mean that I want to withdraw the sample just now. I'm going to choose whatever characteristic that I like. For example, I want to choose these two guys, and then I want to choose another girls over there. I want to choose the different color. I don't want the white color, for example. Because it is a bias sample, this is convenient for me to choose anybody else. But we have the strength and also the weaknesses based on these two sampling protocol. So make sure that you are taking the samples in the probability samples, if possible lah. Why? If not, then some of the assumption in our statistical analysis you cannot do. For example, if you want to do ANOVA, kan? Later on I will explain to you what is ANOVA. If you want to do the ANOVA test, your assumption is three assumptions that you must meet. The first one, your data must be normally tabulated. The second one, your group must be more than 2. Your K is equal to more than 2. And then the third one, you must withdraw a sample from a random population. When we say random population, means that everybody get the equal chance to be selected. That's made probability samples. Okay, that's mean everybody get equal chance to be selected. So how I want to do that? I give one example. I give one number. Everybody I assign with the number. You are number 1, you are number, this class how many people? 29, so many. So number 1, number 29, I put inside a box and then I will do a lottery method. And then I will withdraw the numbers, and then whatever numbers appear in my paper, that one we consider to be selected. That one we call it as a lottery method, but lottery method are considered non-scientific methods. So I prefer you to use the computer generated number, or you are using the random number tables. What is it? You can just go to the Googles and find it out for more information. Okay, this is the examples about the variables. As I explained to you, we have the variables. Variables in Malay, we call it as a pemboleh ubah. Okay, we got 5 different types of variables that you need to understand in my class. The first one, we call it as IV. What is IV? Intravenous. Wrong, is the independent, correct, independent variables. Independent variables, or in other words, or in other form in the statistic, we call it as a factor. You know factor? Faktor. Okay. The second one are your DV. What is DV? Dependent variables. Okay, dependent variable is actually the measurements of your outcome. In the statistic, we call it as an outcome, or in the epidemiology, we call it as the health effects. This is your targeted interest. So in the case of IQ just now, what is my DV? What is my DV? IQ is my DV, H is my IV. Understand or not? IV is the factor. I want to see, are you get older and then you become clever, or are you get older, you become more stupid? That is the hypothesis that I want to test. Of course, I need to have the assumption, and I also need to have some literature to support my judgment or evidence. Okay, the third one, we call it as a moderator variable. Moderator variable, I'm not going to explain to you. You go find out yourself. Moderator is about the variables that are also influence your study, but it's not considered in your study. What is it? You go back and read your research methodology book. Okay, the fourth one, we call it as a confounding. Confounding is the factor that may influence directly with your study, and therefore you need to do some control. So the fifth one, we call it as a control variable. Okay, I'm going to share with you about number 4 and number 5. The number 4 is confounding. Confounding examples to be as follows. Okay, in the case of asbestos exposure, you know asbestos or not? Asbestos can cause lung cancer, correct or not correct? You got case, lung cancer case? You got lung cancer case back? Right, okay, when you got lung cancer case and then you trace back, you can ask the patient whether they are exposing to the asbestos. For example, they're exposing to asbestos. So you want to establish a link between the asbestos exposure with the lung cancer. Unfortunately, there are one co-founders that are truly associated with the lung cancer. We call it as a smoking also. So smoking is actually the confounding variables that can also contribute to the lung cancer. So if you want to conduct the epidemiological study, you cannot establish the causal relationship. Why? Because those who are exposed to asbestos get the lung cancer. Those who are smoking also got the lung cancer. So actually, what is actually made you get those lung cancer? You are not sure. Therefore, the epidemiologists need to understand the confounding factors. The other factors, they might also contribute to the health effects. And therefore, some of the researchers, some of the epidemiologists suggest that we need to do matching. What is the matching? You need to match lah. For example, you got the exposed of the asbestos, and then you got the non-exposed of the asbestos. So let's say here you got 20% smokers, you must also find out the non-exposed to the asbestos is also 20% of smokers. Otherwise, it's not comparative. Otherwise, it's not valid in terms of the statistical approach in the future that you want to interpret. Understand or not understand? Yeah. Okay. So I believe majority of you are going to study about the epidemiological study, or you want to study about knowledge, attitude, practice, blah, blah, blah. But if I were you, I may suggest you conduct epidemiological study. It's much more easier because the data is there. You can just trace back what is the factors, and then you can learn a lot of things after you conduct the epidemiological study. That is just my humble opinion, okay? Don't say that I instruct you to do that. If anybody say like that, I will throw my shoes to your face, okay? No lah, just kidding. So because epidemiology indirectly can give you some ideas lah, why this cancer got this kind of cancer. So how to do that, you can learn from the research method. You can learn from the research methodology, and then you can refer also to your epidemiologist. Of course, epidemiologists inside not working inside the clinics, but of course you can ask your colleague, or you can read first and then ask your supervisor lah, because some of your supervisor know about the epidemiology. Okay, this is an example about the variable. We got lots of variables. In this case, we got the first IV. The first big IV or independent variable, we call it as a demographic. For example, my DV is quality of life. This is a social science model. I just want to give you some examples so that it makes you easier to understand and digest those things. Okay, the first one is the demographic of the respondent. We are going to study the characteristic of the respondent. Why we need to study the characteristic of the respondent? Because we want to make sure that our respondent are similarly the same. You got what I mean? So for example, if I want to sample the basic student, I need to make sure that the proportions of male and female are similar. Otherwise, people will say, oh, your DV is actually influenced because of your gender. No, I don't want that one to be established. I want the establishment of the factors and the effects are because of something. Okay, so therefore, I need to make sure and control about my characteristic. So before you can control your character of your respondent, you need to know what is their character. Of course, the first one, always on all of my study, I'm going to study their demographic respondent. So this is your first objective. Okay, frankly speaking, majority of you are going to study the demographic of the respondent first. And then the next one, we are going to study the factor that associate with our DV. In this case, in this example, I'm going to study the job characteristic. I'm going to study their work condition. I can analyze their workstation. I can analyze the adequacy of the lighting, the economic condition of their workplace. And then I can also calculate the job demand and job control. This is just an example if you are going to do this factor. So if you want to do some sort of example, if you got some example after this, you got some examples or articles or questionnaire or articles, I mean journal articles, you can just give it to me and then we can discuss together. So that particular cases or particular article can become our example, and then we can learn it together. And the last one, and not least, which is the perceived quality of the ICT facilities. So this is the example of the extra IVs. So majority of you are going to consider one IV and another IV, not involve the third IV. Majority of you, because of the interest of time. You don't have a lot of time, right? So majority of you will cover on the demographic and some sort of your variable of interest. For example, kan, you want to study the knowledge regarding the apa, saya pun dah tak ingat lah, your previous study. Apa contoh study yang pernah dibuat puan? Saya tak ingat lah. Study untuk this one is EDOC, right?